There are many people who, in one way or another, are preparing for the end. There's different names for those kinds of people, preppers or doomsday preppers, and there's different documentaries on different people who take preparing for the end times or the tribulation or the zombie apocalypse, whatever the theory they believe. They take preparations to the absolute extreme. There's some who just do a little bit of preparation. Maybe they just stock away a few weeks worth of canned goods and some water and different things, maybe a generator. And then there's those who have independent energy supplies for years, and they have food that can last forever. And you see those commercials from time to time, those people that you can order a tub of food for like 3 months, and it's all of these meals ready to eat. I've never understood. I don't think that I could get in a tub this size enough food for 3 months to sustain me. They claim it'll last you that long. I don't know what it is, but it must be styrofoam or something, because I think I would eat more food in 3 months than what fits in a little container. But you can order those things, and they got those stashed away in an underground bunker, and they're preparing for the end, right? One thing that's always confused me about people who are preparing for the end, like if you know that the whole universe just gets nuked, or there's just civil war or something going on, and you have to go hide in a bunker. Why would you stock your place, where probably the last place you ever are alive? Why would you stock that with food, with like beans and like canned corn and like little like tuna and stuff? Wouldn't you put like shrimp and steak down there? If it's going to be your last meal, you might as well live it up and have something good to eat. Just as a joke, you can laugh. But there are so many people who are preparing for the end, and they take it very, very seriously. But Peter says here in this chapter, but the end of all things is at hand. He's letting us know that, listen, the end of the world is coming as we know it. And Jesus Christ is going to come back. He promised that he would. And he's going to take those of us who are saved with him. And there's going to be, the end just outlined very well in Revelation. And then he says, notice this, but the end of all things is at hand. This is verse 7. Be ye therefore. And he lists some things in the next few verses that let us know basically some principles and some things that we ought to do and incorporate into our life, knowing that the end time is at hand. And as we draw closer and closer to the end, we ought to take more and more heed to what Peter mentioned. So we're going to take a look at that this morning. This evening. Number 1, he says in verse 7, be sober. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober. The word sober is not talking about necessarily just not being drunk, although that is a great definition, and that ought to be the case as well. But it means regular or calm, and here's my favorite, not under the influence of passion. Sober-minded, the Bible says many times. There are many situations in our day and in our week that can cause us to have many emotions that could lead us to sin, right? There's things that pop up that could cause us to be angry. Just this morning, someone pulled out in front of me with the church van, and that could cause us to be angry, not because I'm upset that he pulled out in front of me, but thinking, man, I got, 10, 12 kids in here, and there's really no consideration on a slippery road. That could cause us to be angry, and it's okay to be angry, but then when you mumble some words under your breath that you ought not, then you took it to sin, right? And there's things that can cause us to be angry. There's things that can cause us to be frustrated. Things that can cause us to be sad. Fill in the blank. But Peter says here, knowing the end is near, we ought to be sober, meaning that the passions that come up in a day and the emotions that try to control us, we ought not to have our lives guided by those passions and those emotions. To be sober is to conduct our lives above our feelings, not by our feelings. Because there's some feelings in the day where if you conduct your life or you make a decision based on the feeling that you instantly had, it's not going to be a good outcome. You're going to lose your Christian testimony. So Peter said, and wisely, because he knew that there were going to be things that could cause us to be in a situation where if we followed our feelings, it wouldn't be leading us to an action that would be Christ-like. This will help us, being sober, to live above reproach, to keep our testimony, not to make mountains out of molehills, not to make little things too big, and to keep the main goal in focus. When it all boils down to it, what is the main goal when we're thinking it from the perspective of the world is coming to the end and Jesus is coming back? The main goal is to try to reach others, as many as we can. And we ought not to be controlled and guided by our feelings and emotions. Number 2, he says in verse 7 again, pray. But the end of all things is at hand. Be therefore sober and watch unto prayer. The importance of prayer in our daily lives only increases with each passing day. I hear it said often, I can't do a whole lot for that person in that situation, whatever it is. I can't give them a lot of money. I can't this or I can't that. But, at least I can pray for them. Prayer is not the least that you can do for someone. It's the greatest thing that you can do for someone. And we ought to bathe our church and our families and our church families and the kids that we minister to and those in our county and in our town and in our world that are unsaved to bathe them in prayer. They need it. And the only way that they're going to be reached, the only way that we're going to be able to live properly in this day and age is with the power of God, with prayer. So it's important. Prayer is not the least that we can do. It's the greatest thing that we can do. Number 3, he says in verse 8, and above all things, have a fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover a multitude of sins. Charity, of course, is love. It is benevolence. It is goodwill to men. Charity is supreme love to God and universal goodwill to all. It is not our natural tendency in our old nature and our old flesh to have goodwill to all the time, is it? It can be naturally we're selfish, we're self-centered. We want to take care of us and if anyone else, maybe our family, and that's just about it, and forget everyone else, right? If you don't think that's true, well, it doesn't happen as much anymore on Black Friday because mostly everything's online, right? It's like cyber holiday season, but whenever there would have the people waiting in lines for hours and hours, and the doors would open, and people just sales representatives would get trampled to death every year because people are greedy. They're only worried about them getting to that whatever it is that's on sale because we're naturally selfish. But the Bible says here that we ought to have charity, love, and goodwill towards others, and it didn't say just charity, fervent charity. So I really need to be doing it in a very strong way. We ought to show the love of Christ fervently to all, especially those that are among us. If there's anyone that we show love to, it ought to be those that are in this room, and those that attend our church, and those that are in our town. Number 4, he says in verse 9, use hospitality one to another without grudging. Hospitality is the act or practice of receiving and entertaining strangers without reward. There are many people in our county who are unlovely, as Jesus said, the least of these. And they need our hospitality. And many times, especially around the holiday season, we'll reach out to those people, right? You see any type of sports team, they go in and, the athletes will wear a Santa hat and they'll go in and, kiss some babies and hug some parents and do a little bit of goodwill and maybe give a few $1,000s away. But for the most part, that's kind of just show because it's what they're supposed to do, right? They're multi-millionaires, and they're expected around the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, maybe to go ladle some soup for the homeless or to give, a little check to somebody in need. But outside of Thanksgiving and the Christmas season, we ought to show hospitality to those in need every day. Miss Jen gets to see it probably more than any of us because she works in the court system. It's just the sad, just terrible situations that our kids in our county live in, and young adults and put into positions that they ought not to be, young ladies and young men. And you don't have to go to inner city Chicago to see situations where kids live on the floor and live in conditions that are worse than what your pets live in. You can go to the apartments next to Med's Cafe, or you can go behind Dry Dock, or you can go behind McDonald's, and there's hundreds of children and hundreds of people that are living in places where you wouldn't store your snowmobile. And we need to show hospitality to those people. That's why we pay $100 every other week to fill up the church van. And gas isn't cheap. It's not just because we got so much money in the church account that we're just trying to figure out ways to get rid of it. So we drive the van around to burn some gas. It's because we're trying to show hospitality. And we can't just rest on our laurels as, well, at church we help out kids. But as individuals, what are you doing as a family? What are you doing as an individual to reach out to those people? Have you gone to someone's door that's unlovely and helped them with a situation, fix up something for them? Maybe took them to Seconds on Third and bought them some clothes, or took them to Save-A-Lot and bought them a grocery cart full of groceries. Little things like that, showing hospitality, can make a huge difference. And it can be an open door. If you take someone who needs some groceries, and you go buy them some groceries and buy them a few clothes, they'll listen to just about anything you tell them, including the gospel. And there's an opportunity. And Peter said, as the end draws near, we ought to show hospitality. I need a sip. My throat's getting dry. Number 5. We're halfway through. Verse 10, as every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. We ought to, number 5, minister the grace of God. We have been given an unmeasurable amount of God's grace. Mercy, God's mercy, is holding back from us what we deserve. God's grace is giving to us what we don't deserve. And we have been given, I have been given countless things, blessings in my life that I don't deserve. There's only one thing that I deserve, and that's hell. And that's the only thing that you deserve as a sinner. We only deserve one thing. We're in a world, right, where everybody's so bent on their rights. And, well, I deserve that. No. We don't want to get what we deserve this morning, because we only deserve hell if we're looking at it, if we're splitting hairs. But God has given us so many things through His grace. And Peter just says here, simply, as every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another, as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. God has given us things. How do I steward the grace that God has given me? By sharing some of that with those around me. And that couples together perfectly with hospitality. I don't think it's a mistake that those verses are back to back. Number 6, not only, review really quick, not only ought we to be sober, pray, be fervent in charity, be hospitable one to another, minister the grace of God. But number 6, speak of the oracles of God. Verse 11, if any man speak, let him speak as of the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Amen. It shouldn't be uncomfortable or strange for us to speak about spiritual things. It shouldn't be odd that you go to your dad or your brother or a coworker or a friend and just bring up something that happened on Sunday. It should be like sometimes it's like spiritual things are just like a taboo subject. I can go to Jamie and talk about, hey, you got anything on trail camera? That's so easy and seamless and such a smooth transition. But then if he wants to say, hey, I gave a tract to someone I saw at their house this week, that shouldn't feel awkward for him to be able to talk to me. We should have those conversations all the time. And just as much as we talk about things that we enjoy, we ought to enjoy the things of God. And really that ought to be the main topic of conversation, not things that really, in light of eternity, don't matter. And Peter just says here, if any man speak, let him speak the oracles of God. Number 7, just a couple more. And this is, again, hitting that Peter over and over again talks about trials and things in the Christian life where Christians will, in some way, shape, or form, endure suffering for Christ if we're living our lives the way that we ought. And here in verse 12, beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is in you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. Don't think trial strange. God is going to put things into our life, or sometimes just because we're Christians and we're going against the flow. we're going to run into trials. We were playing a game yesterday. I had never played it before, oddly enough. Upset the Fruit Basket. I'm sure it's a real common game. Many of you have played it before. Where there's probably, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 teens and adults. We were playing it, and when they say upset the fruit basket, you have to move a couple chairs over or something, and there's bodies everywhere. Well, everybody was mostly kind of moving. You have to move at least 2 chairs over, and if you're the guy without the chair, similar to musical chairs, then you're out or whatever. So most everybody would just shift over a couple of chairs. Well, I was going, to be different. I was going against the flow, and I was just crushing into all these guys and whatnot, and they were smaller than me, so they mostly get deflected off, but I was going against the flow, and I knew that I was doing that, and I was, flexing my muscles on them, but as a Christian, that's what it's going to be like. Well, when you live your life as you ought, you're going to be going against the flow. You're going to have mostly everybody going against you, because being a Christian and doing what's right is countercultural. It doesn't fit. And so Peter says here, don't think it's strange when you see a trial. When I was thinking about something strange, maybe one of the strangest things I've ever witnessed, Dad and I and a few other guys in high school, I think, we were driving down a road on Mulkey. I think we were going soul winning or something. We were driving down a hill, or a road, driving down the road, and there was a truck coming towards us, and all of a sudden his front tire fell off and just jumped the snowbank and just rolled like 100 yards into a cornfield. And we stopped and helped him, and I went and got his tire. But that was just weird. Like, when have you ever just seen that? And we just saw the guy driving, and all of a sudden his tire went this way, and he, the front of his truck dipped down, and it was just strange. It was odd. You don't see that every day. And Peter said, don't think it's strange when trials come into your life. Just expect them. Be ready for them. And then he plays off of that in verse 13, but rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. He said, don't think it's strange when you experience trials, whether that's some being rejected when you're trying to pass out a tract or inviting someone to church. No one likes being told no or laughed at, or whether that be something more. And we talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago in Sunday school, where maybe you lose a job opportunity because you refuse to work on Sunday or Wednesday, or maybe we have some friction with the local enforcement because we decide to gather in church rather than stay home whenever they cook up the next wave of whatever it is that they decide is going to be in our country. There could be some bigger things that aren't just like, a little slap on the hand. No, thank you, I don't want to go to your church. But no matter what, no matter the size of the trial, think about Brother Trail, our missionary to Baghdad, who was murdered in Baghdad on Monday. The officials are looking into it. They have no idea why. We know exactly why. Because he was there trying to reach people with the gospel. And he was targeted 100%. So no matter on that scale of having someone reject a tract at the gas pump to giving your life for Christ in a foreign country, Peter said, rejoice in that trial. Because at the very least, even we don't have to like it and say, I love suffering, I love pain. You're weird if you like pain. Nobody likes pain. Pain hurts, okay? But Peter said you can rejoice. Why? Because we're partakers of Christ's suffering. Christ suffered for us. He gave the ultimate price. He died for us. He gave his life. He took on himself our iniquities, and he dipped his soul into hell, and God turned his back on him. If Jesus was willing to do that for us, then we can be willing to suffer whatever trial that comes into our life simply for him. And then lastly, he says, don't only think it's strange when trials come, that we can rejoice in trials, and lastly, be happy in reproach for Christ. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye. When someone rejects us or someone makes it difficult to try to move the gospel forward in whatever way that is, they're not stopping us. They're not rejecting us. Ultimately, they're rejecting Christ. And it's not our job to make Christ acceptable. It's not our job to make the gospel acceptable. It's just our job to make it available. And everyone in our county ought to have an opportunity to hear the gospel. Amy, your family and Ray's family, they got to hear the gospel. They got to see the Romans road. They got to hear it They were able to hear it read. They were able to see Ray's testimony. They were able to hear Dad give a great message on how his friendship and the friendship that we have with Christ. They had opportunity. It's not our job that if they don't receive Christ right away, it doesn't mean we failed. We 100% did our job. We made it available. And it's between them and Christ now to accept or reject. So our job is to make it available. And when we do that, and we suffer reproach, and those are those who don't like it, and they go against it, and there is. Jesus said that we will suffer persecution, that we can be happy, because we know that we are doing God's will for us, and that we're doing the number one thing as a Christian that we ought to be doing, that is sharing the gospel. So Peter said, let me reiterate, I'll read the verse once more in closing. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore, and we ought to be these things,